Let's talk about love. Welcome back to another episode of ABLAZE podcast. Today's episode, we're going to talk about love. I think it's a pretty big subject and it's pretty relevant to myself. I'm still single after many, many, many years of my adult life, and I've been looking for love. Um, Obviously, I want to start with talking about I've kind of grown up in a interesting family setup. It was kind of like my dads were never here. My mum and my aunt would kind of swap around back and forth between Taiwan and living here in Australia with us. So we were always with one parent only. Um, my mum was a person who was always very sort of full of guilt for leaving us sort of in another country on our own, kind of feeling. So she always kind of told us that we need to learn to be more independent, but she always did things for us. And, I didn't really complain about that. I did want to learn things, but I wasn't very, I didn't push myself very hard about it. So I've ended up when I decided to actually move out due to some other circumstances, which we can talk about in another story. I found it very, very difficult. I was essentially playing catch up as an adult because I knew that I didn't really know how to do a lot of essential basic things. Wasn't good at cleaning, wasn't good at organizing myself in the kitchen, wasn't good at cooking. Um, there was a lot of things I had to catch up on, which were basics as an adult. So I would say that, take my story with a grain of salt and know that, um, some things are harder for me in a relationship, mostly because I'm sort of behind to start with. So I guess the best way to start is to talk about how I've presented myself in the past in love. I found myself in my past stories, and by the way, I've had a story where I talked about my exes at the very beginning, somewhat in the early episodes in season one. So you can go back and check that out, where I talk about my exes. Um, I think the main thing to take away is I know that I'm a bit of an anxious attachment. I am somewhat pretty clingy because I'm a big romantic and I'm very physical touch base. That was interesting. I am very physical touch based, and yeah, I find that I generally revolve around the person quite a lot. I lose a sense of myself, which I think is one of the reasons why sometimes it doesn't work out. Because you want to have a very healthy balance when you're in a relationship, as I have learned. You need to obviously spend a lot of time with the other person, make time for the other person, but you also want to be healthy enough that you still retain a sense of self and your own free time, your own hobbies, basically your own sense of identity. I think that's a very big lesson for a lot of people. It's not just me. Um, and it takes a while to learn that. And learning to self love, how to look after yourself, how to respect yourself, how to have a standard for yourself. It's all a very, very big part of self love and a big lesson to learn. It's not easy. Um, that's what I would say is the biggest thing for me. That's what I'm trying to learn right now. And it's very hard because once you're lonely and then once you kind of see someone or get a chance with someone, especially if you really like the person, sometimes things just go out the window. Um, what do I think love is in a modern day value? Um, that's a challenging one. I think for me, love is essentially like becoming best friends. I think the healthiest relations that I've seen in best representations are people who treat the other person like they're the best friends of each other, that they tell each other anything, they don't hide each other, don't like hide anything from each other, they face challenges together, they kind of understand each other or try to learn as much as possible about each other. I've seen really cute things that people do, like which I like to do as well, is get a note in your phone and write down notes about the other person, just so that you remember all their favorite food, all their favorite preferences for things. Um, yeah, and I find that to be the best thing because it's like you learn how to like treat them when they're in a really difficult situation. You know what to say, you know how to like deal with it, you know how to get them out of the cloudy days. um and it's a very difficult person to meet because even today, like, I can't really say I've been a best friend of anyone just yet. I lost my best friend because of certain circumstances from my end, pretty recently within the last couple of years, and I haven't met a best friend since. And it's hard. It's not easy, and it requires me to become like more mature and present myself that way. And I think that's part of the reason why I haven't found love yet. I'm just not quite mature enough yet. But I think modern day value, it's everything's very instant, and because of the instant gratification, hookups have become way more dominant, in a very unhealthy way. And people expect to, like, I have a bad habit that I realized I started developing when I moved out on my own. I On the back of my head, I always kind of felt like, well, friends are great and I love them, but I got to be careful because friends are going to eventually have their own family. Then they're going to have very little time to spend with me. They'll move on and that'll be their priority. And then it's like this fear behind me steers me towards like trying to find another half, like, desperately. And then I feel like I have to like categorize people. Like, I know I do that very subconsciously and it's not a good thing. Like, sometimes I'll be like, this is a friend, this is a date, this is a friend, this is a date, this is a friend, this is a romantic other like potential or something like that. And it's just not a good place to start. You got to know people, you got to get down to like like beneath their skin, fully flesh them out, and you know, be there for them. Really try to present your authentic self. Those are two of the most challenging things I would say that people need to get to learn to do in order to actually have a good relationship nowadays. Sorry, it's very hot today. Um, Taking the first available choice. Like I mentioned before, I guess I have like a bit of insecurity. I'm also, very big romantic and fantasize a lot, and I'm really like want to be in a relationship, and I just love like taking care of like a person that I love as well, doing something special for them, surprising them. But this insecurity that I have and my personality and all that, and not having been in a relationship for such a long time, and dating has been very difficult. I've barely been on any dates in the last probably like 3 or 4 years. Been on one date, I think. Um, it makes me feel like sometimes when the first thing that kind of matches me, like first match that happens, I would probably really want to take it, and maybe take it almost too far just because it's available. And that's not a healthy thing. You still want to be like holding, like, a healthy relationship would be, with yourself especially, is being able to hold your values, hold your morals, and have a standard for yourself and stay at that standard no matter what the situation is and no matter how desperate you are. And that's something that's a work in progress for me. Taking a chance to talk about, I guess, one of the stories I didn't talk about in my previous X stories because this one's more recent, the one that I mentioned. It was a date with a Turkish guy off from, I believe it was Hinge. Yeah, it was Hinge. He was really cute. He was studying English in Australia. Um, and our banter and chats went really well. He was very sweet. He was quite young as well, though. He was still, I think, in his early 20s. Ooh, excuse me. I woke up from a nap, so. Um, and basically, we talked all about, like, he's mentioned that he was really looking for someone to be with because it was very difficult when he came out in Turkey. Like, well, I don't think he came out in Turkey because it was quite difficult, and it's a very sort of, it's still like not a very open country for homosexuals. at all. But we talked about like how nice the country is, how nice it would be to like, talk about his family and, one day to go visit. And we talked about, hanging out, doing a bunch of things. And he was the first person I met that was crazy about Two Broke Girls as well as much as I am, the series. And then we had like a date. And then we had a second day where we were gonna have like spaghetti, and he mentioned he wanted like wine, but then in the end he kind of we picked out a wine, but he also didn't have wine because he was saying that he had to study the next day. So I was like, it was a bit weird that we went through all that chat about it, but he didn't bring it up that he didn't want any. So I don't know, for me, when I have a date planned out, sometimes I kind of want the date to kind of go pretty according to plan. Like, not to say I'm not flexible or like to go with like, sudden changes, but it's just that like when you have a mindset about eating or drinking something, it feels a bit odd when it changes all of a sudden. Kind of like messes with me a little bit, I would say. um yeah, and then at the end, at one point when I was, because I bought him a few things, I knew he really liked coffee and he really needed coffee for school, so I bought him like a keep cup, bought him like a nice instant coffee, nice brand, and then gave that to him as a gift and gave him some gloves as well because to keep him warm because it was very cold at the time. It was rainy as well, and he was very very shy to accept. He kept wanting to like give me back some of the items because he felt bad accepting them, and I was like, no, you should. It's like, it means a lot for me to like, give this to you. And in hindsight, it kind of became obvious why. But basically, when I was taking him back to the station, taking him to the state, walking him to the station for him to go home one day, he gave me a hug and attempted to give me a kiss on the side of my, like a peck on my cheek. But after, basically, I think he was saying in person the spark wasn't quite there for him, and he was trying it out and gave me a kiss and all that just to kind of test it out, but it really wasn't there for him. It was there for me, but yeah, it was just one of those things where it turned out to be more one-sided and not so much for the other person, which is fine. It's just how things are happening. I'm currently also speaking to a person who I might be meeting next week for malatang. Woo woo. Um, because he really likes that kind of food. His Middle Eastern background, but I've just found out that he's got two kids, like 10-year-old and 13-year-old, I think it was, and I'm a little bit like thrown by that because I'm not sure I'm ready to be with someone like more mature, let alone be with someone who's got kids. I think that's a very very big curveball that I have to really think about. But I think maybe it doesn't hurt to go and just get to know the person anyway first and see how things go. No, I believe in people being introduced to my life for a reason, whether for a lesson or for some other purpose. But he's been a nice guy so far, and it's been fun to talk to him. Um, Aesthetically, what do I find attractive? And date ideas. What experiences do I crave and want? The guys I find, which I'm going to just demonstrate some images below and like some videos, like snippets from mostly Instagram profiles, I guess would be the best place to give you examples for. Um, but generally, I look for people with a very smiley quality and like kind of like a cheeky, cute kind of aesthetic to their smile and the way their eyes also smile a lot of the times, and have a very warm personality. Those are like the ones that I really go for, which you'll understand immediately what I mean once I start showing a few of the profiles that I'm talking about. Um, and I think people who look after other people, who kind of put others first, um, and are very physical based, and yeah, and just like sweet and remember things about you and spend time with you. Those are like the very simple qualities I look for in a person. As I said, I don't have a lot of relationship sort of experiences. So I guess I don't really know exactly everything that I'm looking for in a person or how to describe it. But that's probably the gist of it in terms of at least some of the qualities and aesthetically. Um, but yeah, I think quality time and having new experiences together, and really like having the deep conversations are probably the most important qualities I look for and really enjoy. Like I've started becoming, I think, better with banter and better at sort of delivering, directing the conversation, I guess, in a sense, to kind of point things in a more interesting conversation. Um, I think the name is Tiffany Blair. She's the one who does like city romance, like city blind dating kind of series on Instagram. She often has a lot of very good conversation starters, and she goes on random dates. She goes on the street and asks people like, "Hey, you wouldn't mind going on a date with me right now, would you?" And then they'll go on a date. And she always has really good sort of banter and conversation starters. And I think that's kind of been a really good influence. Another thing I really wanted to talk about, which I find very interesting, is, and I don't know how many other people have this kind of insecurity like me. Like, if you've been single a lot like me and you see other people together, it makes you really happy. Like, yes, there's a little bit of a, oh, I wish I had that too kind of feeling, but a lot of it is really much about like happiness, just going, so it makes me so warm and fuzzy and wholesome seeing people like that. What makes me worry the most is sometimes you see people who are together for 7 years or a long time, at least a few years, and then after all that, then they suddenly kind of reveal that they're breaking up. And I don't know, moments like that make me really worry because I'm like, what if that happens to me? What if I finally find sort of the one and then I'm like with them for like 8 years, then finally suddenly something doesn't work out between us and you feel like you wasted 8 years and you don't know if you're gonna ever meet another person. And if you do, what if the same thing happens again? It's a pretty big insecurity, and I feel like it must be relevant for a lot of people. And I don't know, what do you guys do with that insecurity? How do you process that? I guess it's a leap of faith you just have to take with loving. It's the same as after you've been hurt in any way, having to learn to kind of keep loving rather than being defensive or, you know, curling up within your own circle of protection. It's a it's a lesson and a learning curve, I guess. Um, I guess in relation to that, the other thing I wanted to bring up was, how gay relationships and hetero relationships are inherently very different. Um, you know, a lot of people kind of follow through with that whole process where you date, you marry, you have kids. Kids take over your life for a little while. You kind of have to balance out your own marriage or, your relationship between the two of you, and you have to also balance your friendships. And gay sex just inherently in culture as well is very, very different. You kind of hook up a lot, and you probably through the hookups eventually kind of sometimes end up dating a bit, or you get bored of hookups and you kind of drop out that scene. Then you eventually date, then you find like a partner, you get a dog, um, and that's that, and or you start a business together, stuff like that. It's just, I think it's a very different trajectory overall, and it's very hard to kind of, even like with marriage, you kind of, um, I think some marriages open up their relationship because things get a bit bland and get a bit old, and that's part of the reason why like some people lose spark. Like you have to keep the spark alive in a very different way for gay relationships. And I could be wrong because I don't really have any experience in that, and I could reveal a lot more once I do start dating someone consistently, and we could talk a bit more about that then. But I feel like inherently it's very easy for things to go stale, for things to kind of fall into routine and become sort of like roomies in a sense. And they were roommates, rather than being still like best friends, but relationship, in boyfriend relationship, relation. I mean, sorry, rambling. But yeah, I wonder what other people think. What do you think from listening to this episode in regards to this kind of subject? Like, what do you think about this part? Um, what is your experience like if you've had longer relationships as a gay person? Especially if you're bi and if you have both, that would be quite interesting to hear your thoughts. Um, conventional ideas about love that just aren't true. One of the biggest ones I've recently learned that I think is worth thinking about is kind of like the same way that I used to kind of pocket, like pigeonhole people. Uh, I think it's a very big misconception to kind of think everything is about like where it ends for love, like the ending to being together, whether they're together forever, like being sort of like the where people focus on. So the journey, like the journey, is kind of often what do you call it? The destination is often more cherished than the journey itself, or focused on than the journey itself. So, for example, you're with someone, they probably make a huge impact on your life. You don't end up together, but during the time that you were together, you guys had a lot of good times and a lot of good things happened to you. And in that case, the journey itself is more important than the destination. And we focus so much on like the happy ending, the destination, and it could be so unhealthy in that sense because Hollywood and mainstream pop culture just all focus on that and kind of promote that. It's a bit of a propaganda of its own. And I think it's worth pointing out to as many people as possible to learn to appreciate and be in the moment. And I guess that's where it kind of answers the 7 year relationship question, to know that it's probably more important to stop worrying over that for many years and be sort of pushed out of the situation, not living in the moment. Um, Whereas if you lived in the moment, you might just stop worrying about it and maybe things will work out. Maybe they won't, but maybe you still take away a lot of good things by living in the present and really um, living it up with the person, I guess. Um, the other thing that's worth talking about is there's kind of like the stereotype that we say opposites attract. I feel like that's not always true. There has to be some level of similarity that makes you excited to be with the person, to share things with the person. And I do find opposites attracting some of the reason why I go after a lot of times. I don't really go after Asian background people or people with very similar background to myself, just because that I think that's kind of too similar. So like I would usually turn out to be friends with these people more. But generally, they have to have sort of some sort of really similarity, like big foodie or into sort of the same shows that I'm into, like little things like that. Just like kind of sparks a little excitement in like, oh, that's something we can talk about. Let's talk about it together right now. Let's organize something to do with that right now. That's what's happened with the person I'm having a date with right now. Um, the not right at this moment, but that I'm chatting to right now. He's big on food, and like we talked about food because I pointed it out. Like I was asking him what kind of food is like, what's his first like top three favorite restaurants, etc. Yeah. Um, and one of the ones that I really want to talk about that I think is quite interesting is I made the point down here. So love is imprinted from how you're raised. I think the way we see love or recognize love is very much about how we were receiving love as we grew up. And my mum's form of love was very materialistic, but also a lot of like acts of service. Um, she would, buy things for us because she felt bad. She would try to make nice food for us, take us out to good places to eat, try to prepare things for us, or try to do as much as for us, clean things for us. Just, she's very much an act of service kind of person. And which is why I think, now that I think about it, my way of showing love is very much about making things and creating things for the person, remembering what kind of preferences they like, but it also means that I kind of push myself to do it over the top, to kind of showcase my love, almost like feeling like I need to prove a case, and which is very much what my mom was doing. And I think that's quite interesting. It's a thing to be careful about and try to keep it healthy. Um, Another point I had here, which was worth talking about, is a lot of issues can be solved in a relationship by reaching deep down inside of yourself. Um, like when you're dating and you say, I miss you, or maybe it's to an ex and you say, I miss you. Do you really miss them? Or what's really happening there is like reaching down to the deep root issue. Is it something to do with your self worth, or is it something to do with your self values, your morals? What is really happening there? Like maybe you're feeling alone and you're feeling like you don't want to be dealing with that. You don't want to be sitting with yourself for too long. You don't want to sit with your own company for too long, and hence you're going back grabbing for that attention, even though you don't really want to be back with that person per se. Um, this is kind of in relevance to the guy, the music producer I recently interviewed called Breezy. There's an episode out. You can go check it out in season three, current season. He has a song in his album called Waterfall, and it's very interesting. It's his intro to the introduction to the album. So very simple lyrics, but very very emotional. And in the it's essentially talking about how he studied a course when in his younger years, and he really didn't want to finish it, and he like struggled to kind of tell his parents about it. And I think pulling that sort of idea and talking about relationships in comparison to like relationships, it's quite interesting because people often need closure for a lot of things, and we end up pushing ourselves to do things that we don't want to do, or don't really have to do in order to get some closure. And that could be like closing up a relationship, getting sort of like some final words in, and understanding kind of like, why did you hurt me, even though like the whole point is he hurt you, so you really shouldn't care about that to begin with. And for studying, that's another interesting case. It's kind of like, well, you've already spent that many years, you feel like you have to like finish the course. No, but it's like giving you pain. It's really making you feel like you're dying inside. Then no, you probably shouldn't have to finish the last few years of the course just to kind of get like things like, so you feel like you didn't waste all the years. But really, it kind of weighing up the sort of give and take of things, it doesn't seem to make much sense. It's not. It's kind of a way you're looking for closure to the story, to that chapter of your life, and it's a thing that everyone seems to do. And it's not a healthy thing. It's not good. I thought that would be an interesting thing to bring up. And I think another thing is we struggle about relationships like I do, and sometimes I overthink too much about it and put so much into it and kind of be like feel like my life is going nowhere when I don't have a relationship. But really, it's important to spend a moment to remember how far our society has come and how civilization has come. That during this sort of time frame, we don't have to worry about certain diseases like HIV is no longer a life-threatening disease. We have hot water whenever we want to. We have electricity whenever we want to. There's like all these developments in society that we have that people in the past, like maybe like a couple of decades back, would probably have like a more struggle with. There's a lot less poverty in the world. There's still an issue of it, but it's a lot better than it used to be for like a lot of countries. Things like that. So just take a moment to remember if you're feeling down. Sometimes it's good to also remember all the good things that are happening in your life. Um, let's see. I think one of the things that really damaged my confidence, that I've been trying to kind of get out of that curve from, is when I dated a person called Malachi. He was like my favorite date of all the experiences I ever had. He was the one closest to working out as a boyfriend, and it was very much like a date thing. And he really did like me back, but not in that way, not enough that he wanted to be in a relationship, because I think he was just not looking for a relationship at the time. And I think I took it very personally, on a personal level, like deep down. We connected very spiritually as well, and I was at the peak of my self confidence. I felt good about how I presented myself. I felt good about what kind of person I was. I felt good about my relations with other people. And I think when it happened at that time, and got so close to, I almost was like close to introducing him I actually did introduce him to some um, close friends as my boyfriend. um, and if you want to hear the full story, it's in the X episode, so you can have a look there. I won't go through the whole thing because it's a bit long. Um, but having it not work out during that kind of time frame where I was at my peak, I think it really damaged me a lot, and it made me question like my own confidence. It made me question the person that I am a lot, and made me question my value to others. And I think that's why I still struggle with a little, like, coming back from that. I'm still like working on my confidence, working on like feeling as good as I used to when I dress up and look nice. It's it's just something I wanted to bring up. I think a lot of people will probably relate to that. um Next up, two really good points that worth talking about if you've never heard about it. One of them is bid for affection, and another one is conflict management. It's just a general topic in general, the things that I've learned about it. Bid for action, for affection. I forget who it's by, but it's by a very famous, what do you call it? I guess like person who talks about relationships, and studies relationships, but he's a very, very famous guy for it. And he talks about, like, little things that people do sometimes in relationships are bid for attention, and depends on your marriage and relationship, whether it works out or not. It really, really heavily relies on um, whether you respond in that moment. So, for example, someone could, give you a little hug on the way over when they're grabbing something from the kitchen. That's a bid for attention. Whether you respond back with a hug, or give them a kiss or something like that, how you approach that interaction really determined a lot of their social experiment on whether, like, the marriages would end up having divorces or not. And I think that's so important, because you can see in some relationships people don't respond like to bids for attention, or they kind of drop out eventually, or in bad situations or certain, like, tough, stressful situations, they just kind of disconnect. um, which I think is something I have to, like, be careful with, because I sometimes during confrontation can shut down a little bit. I get a little bit intimidated by it. But I've always been someone who's, pretty open to people's opinions and um, constructive feedback and criticism. So I try to take on board as many things as I can. It is like a good thing to have, and it's a skill set I really, really try to work on. Conflict management, I think the biggest lesson I've learned, that I think a lot of people still don't know, is um, you want to, when you're in a fight, people very easily sink into the me versus you mentality, but really you're supposed to be thinking of it as you're fighting something as a team. You're fighting a topic, or a third party, or an entity of its own, but it's you and your partner as a team. So it's got to benefit both of you, the result. And that's how you kind of avoid falling out very quickly during these circumstances. And that's how you kind of get defensive and all that other bullshit. um and I think love languages is another one that's kind of interesting to talk about, because everyone always goes, what's your love language? And I think one of the best, I forget which video I was watching that mentioned this, but the guy was basically saying, like, I don't think you have a love language. I think for a lot of people it's all of them. You kind of need to kind of shuffle through and do a combination of all of them at some point, to kind of fully get like a healthy relationship and feel you, to really nourish you. And I believe that, I think I've at least done more than two or three, in terms of like every relationship. I would go through a few different things, um, maybe you do have a predominant one that you kind of reach out for, but I think you do have to like kind of eventually use all of the forms of love languages in order to communicate your love fully, if that makes any sense. And I think marriage, when you talk about marriage, kids is often another big topic for gays. And to me, honestly, I think it just divides into, I just don't think I'd be a very good parent. I have a lot of issues myself when I was growing up as a kid. So I'm like, I don't think I'd be fully fleshed out for that job yet. I mean, first step to take is always good to have a pet first and look after that and then see how you go with that. That's kind of like what people usually do with their kids too. Um, but I think it's a very big step. And I think from my views of other people's relationship videos that are documented on Instagram in their accounts, it's usually divided into the party of people who have always dreamed of having kids, since a young age, or having a family in that sense, as opposed to people who just want to be there with the other half and maybe have a pet at the most. Like I think that's the kind of two main big groups that you have. And that's how you kind of determine which kind of like relationships will go where. And I think that's fine. Um, I just don't think it's for me, to be honest. It's not really something I've always dreamed about, and I just don't think I'd be very good with kids. Um, yeah. I want to talk about speed dating experiences, just briefly, because that could probably make for another episode because this episode is getting slightly long. But I went to an event years back called City Swoon in Sydney, and it was a pretty fun event, basically. And it's better if you kind of sign up for the membership because your ticket will be a lot cheaper, especially if you're going on more than one, which I think you do have to go at least two or three of them to really like get a chance with someone, like for something to happen. And what happens is you get your ticket, it's on your phone, and then you show up on the day to, for example, they'll choose like a nice bar or restaurant, and then you'll go there, and then you'll get open your phone, and then you'll meet like the person hosting. He's usually guides you there. He'll be like, "Hey man, is it your first time? It's great. Don't worry. This is the area that we're going to be doing it." And then have a sit down. Once you're ready, you can go up and open the app, and then you'll have like a scanner for your first free drink, so you can get a free drink while you wait. Then, as people finally all show up, you'll get your first notification in the app, and it'll show you the picture of the first person that you match with. And then you'll go look for the person, everyone shuffles around, sits down with the person. Then you get 10 minutes and you just talk about whatever you want to talk about, try to get to know that person within that time frame, get an idea whether you'd be interested in that person or not. And you do that for about maybe like 4 or 5 times. And then basically the gist of it is then afterwards you can get another drink and you can kind of stay behind if you want and chat more with everybody, including like the people that you didn't match with, or you could just head out after that. But basically, the next morning they would release the contact information on their website for the entire event, so you can reach out to people that you were interested in that you matched with, but you can also reach out to people that you think you might be interested in but didn't have a chance to actually match with. They would all be listed, but for a limited time, so you have to move fast. And I thought that was really cool. I went to about three or four of them. I met a really, really good friend there, but I never really ended up like having a date with anyone. Did see one person that matched really well to the point that they were at the bar waiting for the drink and they started making out, and we were like, "Oh, somebody's getting some action." But it's a pretty cool thing, and Sydney actually has a lot of them. So I'm looking at attending some more in the future when I'm a bit more stable with my money saving, because money's a little tight right now. So I can't really spend on that. But there's a few like ones called, I think, merge dating. That's a pretty big one. So it'd be quite interesting just to try a few different ones and see how their formats differ from each other and whether it's any more success than that one. Yeah. And yeah, I guess I will end things there for now. That's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about. Let me know if you have any other sort of love related sort of topics that you think are really big and worth sort of talking about and sharing some point of views about. Or if you have any sort of of your own responses to things that I've said or stances that I've taken for any of these topics. I'm just going to end the video with sharing some of my favorite guys online, my favorite on internet crushes from Instagram. And you can also let me know who your favorites are from this list. But anyway, thank you for joining me for my little, I guess, a little love talk. I hope you've had a really good week and you're going to have a really amazing weekend. I will talk to you soon. See you guys later, my little sunshines.
We're gonna keep it low key, keep it softly spoken, with no strings tying you to me. I'm happy in your company with no emotion, 'cause my love deserves to be free. I never wanna look at a house in the garden, I never wanna lock you down. I know you're not mine, it's just my turn, but we can still have fun for now. Told me you don't really do commitment, trust me, consider your message received. When you said you couldn't take us too seriously, I must admit I was relieved. 'Cause I never wanna play happy families with you, but I like having you around. I'm fully aware this is a flash in the pan, but we can still have fun for now. So much attention, and when you're moving in another direction, don't worry, I get it. I meant what I said when I said it, lady. I never wanna look at a house in the garden, I never wanna lock you down. I know you're not mine, it's just my turn, but we can still have fun for now. No, I never wanna play happy families with you, but I like having you around. I'm fully aware this is a flash in the pan, but we can still have fun for now. Yeah, we can still have fun for now. Oh, we can still have